Okay, hi everyone. My name's Sophie. I'm just going to speak for a moment while everyone's coming into the room and settling. I hope everyone's enjoying the conference. I know a lot of time and effort went into organising this event. I'm a member from the ANU Pacifica Student Association. I'm also a student here. I'm currently studying a Masters of Asian and Pacific Studies. Hopefully we'll be writing a thesis on New Caledonia. I haven't really got a research question in mind yet, so if you know anything about New Caledonia or anyone who specialises in New Caledonia, please come and see me after the session. I'd be more than happy to talk with you. Yeah. Anything else? Yeah. I guess I'll hand the mic over then.
Thanks very much. Thank you very much, Sophie, for that introduction, and welcome everyone to this, the first session of day 2 in this room. The more discerning amongst you will have noticed that I'm not Dr. Judy Putt. Judy is the convener of this session and unfortunately cannot be here. She's in PNG as we speak. So she's asked me, a colleague, Sinclair Dinnen at DPA, to stand in for her this morning, and I'm very happy to do that. This session is titled Risk and Resilience, Investigating and Promoting Personal and Community Safety. And for those of you that were at the last session in this room yesterday, where we were talking about sort of conflict and peace building, and we were talking both about, in a way, the sort of problems of conflict, but also the extraordinary resilience that has been demonstrated in many of those sort of communities most directly affected by conflict in terms of peace-building activities. Well, some of these themes, I think, are highly relevant to what we're going to be talking about this morning. The panel that we have, which is a fabulous panel, who I'll introduce in a moment, have been drawing, well, they will draw on Pacific Research Program, PRP-funded research that has been looking at vulnerabilities and protective factors in respect of the safety of women, children and communities in different parts of the region. And drawing on their research findings, our panellists will talk about some of the key risks and localised meanings of safety and social problems in a number of different local contexts, as well as talking about sources of support and intervention. Now, the three presentations are really sort of quite different, but there are these sort of common themes, I think, sort of running through them. And I'll just sort of briefly introduce the panellists before we talk. We have Yasmin Carr from Fiji. Yasmin is an early career researcher, an educator and a social justice advocate based in Fiji. And her work centres on gender equity, disability and social inclusion. Jasmine is co-founder and co-lead of Oceania Pride, advancing LGBTIQ+ rights and intersectional inclusion across Fiji and the Pacific. We then have Palu Ingram, who's a PhD candidate here at the Department of Pacific Affairs at the ANU. And Palu began her professional career in 2007 with experience across children's services, early childhood education and care sectors. And Palu has a particular interest in child development, children's wellbeing and child safety, and she is looking at these issues in PNG for her PhD thesis. We then have Dr. Francis Isaku, who is an associate professor and currently also Pro-Vice Chancellor at the Lutheran University of Papua New Guinea. And Francis has previously held various sort of senior management and academic positions at the PNG University of Natural Resources and Environment and the PNG University of Technology. And Francis has a PhD from the ANU in Environment and Natural Resource Management. And he also has a long-standing interest in conflict resolution. So without further ado, let me hand you over to Yasmin for the first of our presentations.
Bula Vinaka and Namaste, good morning to you all. My name is Jasmine, but for publication purposes I use Jasbandkar, which is my legal name. This paper is written by myself and Dominica, who specializes in gender, as well as Sarah Amin, who is a sociologist specialist who used to be with USP. This research, this is one of the chapters that we have written together, but there's Amanda in the room and there's Teresa in the room who have also written chapters towards this publication as well, and I'd be happy to share the links with you guys after the presentation is done. The title of my presentation is Safety on Stilts, and there's a reason why I've chosen that, and I'll delve into it a bit later. And this research was done in an informal settlement called Windongo, which is not too far from Suva City. So before I begin, I would like you to picture something in your mind. Just use your imagination, and as the title suggests itself, picture a house built on wooden posts over water. It stands tall and provides shelter. And when you look at it from a distance, it's a home. But the ground beneath it is very unstable. A king tide, a cyclone, or an eviction notice can pull those stilts from under it in a matter of hours. This is the reality of the Windongo settlement where this study is set. And this presentation discusses how people, especially women, in the settlement build their safety on shaky ground, and what happens when the tide of nature or time rises against them. My contribution will be a very deeply qualitative look at one place, which is the Windongo settlement, and I argue that you cannot understand women's safety without understanding the structural precarity of land, environment, and infrastructure that makes the daily lives of the people in the community negotiate with insecurity all day and every day. And then my colleagues will share insights from Palau and PNG afterwards. So, what makes the Windongo community unsafe? Before I delve into that, just a little bit about what we covered in terms of the data that we captured. We interviewed 21 participants from the community, which included elderly people, youth, women and girls, and persons with disabilities. Queer people were approached several times, but they were very reluctant to participate in this study due to safety concerns. There were 14 women, 9 of which were indigenous, 5 were Indo-Fijian. And then while the focus of this study was women and girls, very organically men became participants in this study, and I'll discuss it a little bit later as well. So 7 men were part of this study as well. 3 were indigenous men, 2 were Indo-Fijian, and then there were 2 youths. And the if you want to find this publication on the site, it's called Women's Safety in the Pacific Region, a pilot study. So for two reasons, men also became part of this study. One, because they were part of the equation when we talk about safety and unsafety. And two, it also made it easier for us to access the women in the community to get interviews from. As part of the study, we honored their time and offered a compensation of $30 for the honorariums, and $10 was also offered for people who did the online survey. So in Fiji, 58% of the population live in the urban areas. This is the latest statistics from 2021. And 1/3 of them live in informal settlements like the Windonga settlement. Windonga settlement is located 6 kilometers from Suva City and about a kilometer from the regional university, the University of the South Pacific. It is, if not one of the oldest informal settlements in Suva, and has 80 plus years of history. It has 4 generations of people living there, 840 in total, who live in 139 households across the settlement, and 295 of them are children. And houses are built on silts in this community, every house, because there are king tides that affect the community. And it has a combination of old settlers as well as new settlers. In more recent times, it is now heavily industrialized. It is enroached. It has enroached the wetlands. The shorelines, which used to be very close to people's homes, is now 100 meters away. Because the lands have been reclaimed for industrialization. Mangroves are very sparse. It floods frequently in this community and is heavily overcrowded as well. So the 4 main themes of unsafety in Windonga settlement is 1, land insecurity, which is one of the most unstable silts of this community. The second is environmental decay. And then there are new faces that have been part of the community, and it's leading to an erosion of trust amongst the community members as well as people who have been settlers there for a long time. And finally, there is a lot of state neglect that happens in this community as well. In terms of land insecurity, people have lived under the threat of eviction for 20 plus years. So every time an election is near, someone promises them that they will get evicted from this place and be taken to a better place, which has electricity. And then the community sort of got resilient around that and thought that this is something we will hear all the time, but we'll never be evicted. Until in 2025, they received a formal court notice to be evicted by the landowners who happen to be business people. It has now 3 to 4 generations of people that are facing eviction. It also includes people who use their lifelong savings to repair their houses or extend their houses in order to accommodate for newer family members, or family members who sometimes come from villages or other places to stay with them in search of work closer to Suva City. So they are not just losing their home, they are also losing their life saving that they invested within that community. One of the participants when we were interviewing described a sleepless night, where the moment they got the eviction notice, it became very real that they have to now uproot their lives and move to somewhere they don't know, and wasn't able to sleep. And this was something that was very common around other members of the community as well. The environmental decay is seen as a rising tide. This community, although so close to the city, Suva City Center, has no electricity. solar powered, but solar is very unreliable, especially because if any one of you has been in Suva, it rains almost every day. So solar is unreliable in itself on an everyday basis, and then the cyclones make it worse. People use lanterns and candles, and this creates a fire hazard as well. I have lived in this community for the better part of my 25 years of my life, and our house got burnt twice because of using lanterns and candles. And there are other houses that had the same fate in this community as well. And because it's an informal settlement, the houses are very close to each other as well. And if one house catches fire, the blaze can take several houses all at once because of the close proximity it has. Flooding is also an issue because of the king tides, and then the newer communities have come in. The drainage is very poor because these are not government serviced areas. The government pays no attention in terms of sewage, drainage, flood zones, etc. So when it rains, people literally walk in this community in sewage water, which then poses health risks. People get sores on their legs. One of the ladies said, when it floods, we cannot go outside, and if we go, we get sores on their legs. And then there's mosquito-borne diseases as well that riddles the community. Then the issue of light is something that a lot of women and girls described as something that posed a lot of threat in their lives. They were not able to move at night. Children were not able to study for longer periods of time because of the issue of light. And phones were also not able to charge because the solar wasn't sufficient enough for them, which also meant that if there was an emergency, they couldn't just grab the phone and call authorities. Then there's the erosion of trust through new faces. A lot of people faced anxiety around newer people moving into the community. So like I had previously said, and please stop me if I'm speaking too fast, I intend to do that. There was this one generation that started the community, which was my grandfather, more than 80 years ago, and was later joined by an indigenous family. So these are the two founding families in that community, and they had children, and the community spread. And then after some time, there was another informal settlement not too far from where Vindongo settlement is. They were removed from there because they wanted to industrialize that area, and these people were then moved to our community. So now the community has the old Indo-Fijian community, the old indigenous community, and then the new indigenous community and the new Indo-Fijian community. So there's 4 sets of people now who have lived together for more than 20 years, and things were not so bad until afterwards a new bunch of people also started coming out. And then some of the older people within this community were able to find land or go and rent out because of the problem of electricity. I myself moved out of this community because when I started university, I needed electricity, so I moved. And that was the same sentiments other people also shared. So people also sold their houses, and new people started being injected into this community. It has grown, and this growth brings an anonymity of people who people don't know them, and with it, an anxiety of what could happen. One of the participants said, there are so many new faces in this settlement now, so we can't trust anybody. One of the participants, who is a young woman, middle-aged woman, carries a knife with her to work every single day. And she said, because she comes back home when it's dark, she keeps her hand inside her purse and holds that knife like her life depends on it until she reaches inside her house. Another factor that affects the community is the state neglect, which is the most missing pillar in this study. Police are seen as useless civil servants, and they are very slow to respond. For example, a woman reported her phone being stolen, and for the past 6 months, until this study, and to this day, before I came, I found out that the woman still hasn't found her phone, and the police is still telling them, we are going to call you. The police have also been subject of abuses in the community. So when they see a group of boys hanging out, they immediately assume they're up to no good, that they are doing criminal things, and they go and slap them. Sometimes they also take their pocket change as well. And then the politicians, they only visit them when they want the vote. They come with big promises of safety and security, especially around land security if they win. Once they win the elections, they disappear. And they never return to the community to ask if there is something that they could do for them. This is both national and local government. Because this study focused a lot on women and girls, the gendered experience is something that was a bit more in-depth that we looked into. So the life of women in Windonga settlement has always been full of danger. Safety is always reliant on women being very resilient, and the constant watchful gaze that they have to have while navigating themselves within this community. While you walk on campus in Canberra, you have the luxury to look at your phone, read something along the way, but women in Windonga settlement are not able to do that. They have to ensure that their eyes are fixed on the road, they look ahead, look behind them, look sideways to ensure that nobody is following them. While the days are a bit manageable, the night becomes much, much riskier. The bus stop, the main road, shops and neighbors all become danger zones. The shop is about 10 minutes walk away. So imagine if you run out of sugar and you're a household of just women and girls. You will not risk going to the shop, and you will just go without. People don't even go to their neighbor's house anymore because of how unsafe they feel. Women also dress down. They leave all their nice clothes at home. They don't wear jewelry. If they do, even the fake ones that they do wear to work, by the time they are about to get off the bus stop, they've taken it all out and put it in their bags. Although the electricity and street lights, etc., are a problem, women do not take out their phones even to use it as a torch to light the way, because they know they will become targets. Theft happens all the time. Phones, solar panels, even clothes from the lines are regularly targeted. One woman told us a generator was stolen while it was still running in the house. While it was providing electricity to their house, someone just came, grabbed and ran with it. One woman had, her husband just recently passed away, and because of space issue, the funeral was not held at her house, but somewhere else. By the time she returned home 2 days later, her solar panels were gone. And this is very recent. Youth and drugs is also a problem. Meth and marijuana is heavily concentrated, and young people are users as well as peddlers within this community. So some women described how at night they would just see strangers walk into the community, and they used to wonder what was happening, why were new people just walking in and out at odd times, until they found out that people were actually peddling ice within this community. Domestic violence is also an issue, but it's not something that is talked about. People only whisper about it. One resident, for example, joked about disagreements between couples in a very, oh, it's none of our business, let them fight. We try to stay away from it. But serious discussions are subtly discouraged. This is the hidden violence that exists, but it's always shamed into silence. So it also stops women from accessing help. Resilience is seen as a daily practice for this community, for women, girls, as well as men. When the government is not effective, women and their families continue to persevere. They create safety from available resources, including kinship, vigilance, faith, and mutual aid. So a lot of the girls are always accompanied by their parents. They coordinate with each other, where the parents are waiting for them at the bus stop and escorted back home together. Sometimes people use neighbors to do these sorts of things. For example, one family needed to go to the airport to drop somebody and needed someone to look after their house. They asked one of their indigenous neighbors to sit on their porch and drink kava, and they did so very happily to assist the family. But resilience is not a success story in this community, and it shouldn't be. It's a survival that comes with a cost, and no one pays attention to these costs. So the community member I was said when they came back after the neighbors looked after their house, they gave them some money for cigarettes and kava, or sometimes they bring takeaways just to say thank you. Knowing people also is a strategy that people use to feel safe. Residents build relationships with each other so that they can look after each other, something like a neighborhood watch zone. Collective guardianship is also another strategy that people in this community have used. So women move in groups, especially at night. Or if a male is available, they will always have a male escort in order to feel safer. The Turangani Koro serves as a community hub in this community and has now started engaging youth into doing work around the community, also inviting people to speak about, for example, HIV, drugs, etc., in order to build resilience and also educate the community members into doing something positive of their time. Self-reliance and practical tools that communities engage in, carrying knives for protection. There were 2 people that we interviewed out of the 21 that carried knives. If people felt, especially women, if they felt they were in danger, they would scream their relatives' names, and this would be male names, in order to scare people away. The community has formed a committee that organizes cleanups, that helps with the management of the drainage system within the community. They are now doing sports days, etc., as acts of rebuilding community and togetherness that has slowly eroded, and as well as a trust-building activity. What needs to change in this community? Women's safety in Mindonga is not an issue of bad men or bad family values, but rather it's a structural instability. You cannot tackle gender-based violence without dealing with land insecurity, environmental health, and the lack of basic services. And before I end my presentation, I also wanted to share some other quotes from the publication. One woman says, so wherever you go, you take your daughter with you. That's for safety. You can't leave her alone in the house, you know. The boys nowadays, they're very dangerous, said Anna. While the Indo-Fijian people in this community have expressed feeling unsafe, especially with the newer indigenous people around, there was this one particular family of Suren who found a sense of community and safety of coexisting with their indigenous neighbor, which was very different from other people that we have interviewed. There was also this notion of jealousy that was presented in both communities, Indo-Fijian as well as indigenous communities. And it was, sometimes it took the form of witchcraft. The nervousness surrounded by witchcraft was observed in mostly the older population in this community in comparison to the middle-aged and the younger population. And then there was this one lady who said, while the shops are 5 to 10 minutes away from the community, there is a sort of a canteen within the community, and this is the one house that were able to afford to get electricity on their own. They spent thousands of dollars to do so. So they have a small canteen. And this canteen obviously hikes the prices of goods that they sell. One woman said, we can go buy the stuff from this canteen rather than going to the main road because it's very risky, you know. Some of the bad boys there at the shop, we don't know them. She added that sometimes when the little girls and boys go to the shop during nighttime, they will be robbed, their money and phone. It's very risky going out. Never mind, it's a bit expensive here at the canteen. We will go and buy it here. So the safety also comes with an added burden on finance. Because they don't have electricity, food preservation, how am I doing this time? Food preservation is also a problem. They aren't able to use refrigerators, which means vegetables and meat shopping has to be done daily. There is a cost associated with going to the supermarket, paying bus fare or taxi fare. This is also a community that is heavily flooded. So the woman that we interviewed who has disability is on a wheelchair. And one time when there was an emergency and she needed to go to the hospital, she was unable to because the track is very bumpy and not wheelchair friendly. She had to wait for an hour for neighbors around her to come. And she happened to be a bit of a Pacific woman, so a bit bigger. So they had to wait for 4 men to help her carry her out of the community to be able to access healthcare. Emergency services like fire, ambulance cannot reach the community at their door. There is a ground where it ends. From there onwards, they have to bring the patient to the ground and be able to then access the ambulance service. There's this one woman who shared a strategy around the flooding, right? So we asked her, because she just came from work and was wearing nice shoes, we were asking, so how do you manage to keep such nice shoes in a flood-prone area? And then she tells us, the plastic bags, shopping bags that we used to have, she ties those plastic bags around her legs and puts a sellotape around it, crosses the flooded waters, and then throws them once she's crossed. So people come up with these very creative ways to overcome the various things that affect this community. Some of the recommendations are to secure the land. Land security means secured people. The threat of eviction creates insecurity. If relocation must occur, it should be fair, well-planned, and involve the community, not oppose it. Currently, they're just told, we'll put a chunk of you in this area and some of you in this area, and that's it. That's all they know. If they are going to get proper electricity, proper sewage in the new place, they don't know because nobody consults them. There's also a need to invest in basic safety infrastructure. Electricity these days is no longer a luxury item. It is a necessary tool for safety. It provides light, charges phones and allows children to study. And then there's also the issue of proper drainage that helps prevent diseases. These are measures to prevent violence. When I used to live in this community, and at that time we didn't even have solar, I used to walk 5 minutes from my house to go to a street light and study under that street light. Some girls who are very studious still do that in this community, 30 years on. And the fact that people need to stop romanticizing resilience. Communities like Windongo are not resilient because they are strong. They are resilient because they have no other choice. The aim of policy should be to lessen the needs for desperate resilience, not to celebrate it. The women of Windongo are not seeking pity. They want the ground beneath their stilts to become solid. As researchers, practitioners, and policy makers, our job is to help pour concrete, not just stand on the shore and admire how high they have built. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jasmine. So we're going to move straight ahead with Palu's presentation, which we should have up here. Oops. Thanks, Palu.
Just press this to first.
Yep.
Oh, okay. Good morning, everybody. My presentation, oh, sorry, is that too loud? Okay. My presentation today is on children's risk and resilience, family, school, and community protection in Papua New Guinea. I begin today by acknowledging the traditional custodians of the land in which we gather and learn today, as well as the traditional custodians of the land of those attending online. I pay my respects to the elders past and present. I also pay my respects to all Indigenous cultures. Trigger warning. Please note that my presentation may be triggering or traumatic for some listeners. There will be discussions on violence against children. I have been cautious, but I understand that this may be triggering or traumatic for some experience for some people. If at any time you feel that this presentation is too much for you, please feel free to leave. I will not be offended. It is important that you consider your own well-being. You are also welcome to approach me after the presentation and if you need to discuss anything. As a brief introduction, my name is Paolo Ingram and I'm a current PhD student here at ANU. I've worked in the care and education industry for over 18 years now. My thesis title is Preventing and Addressing Childhood Development Delays and Welfare Concerns in Papua New Guinea. My research was conducted across Port Moresby and 3 Central Province villages. My presentation will focus on one aspect of my PhD research, child protection, and how it has shaped the interconnected systems between family, school, and community. The trauma associated with violence sustained during childhood has a lifelong impact on a child's growth, development, and general well-being. Practitioners, researchers, teachers, and educators in the community all play a pivotal role in a child's life by providing children with the essential tools and skills that are required as they progress through life. One such skill is the ability to respond and seek help if they experience violence or neglect at any time during their childhood. It is evident that violence against children has a link to the broader issues such as crime, insecurity, and social disorder that not only affects the child, but a society as a whole. This is without a doubt a global issue that not only affects a child's growth and development, but also affects a country's social and economic development, according to the WHO. Why does this matter? So why does this matter? Let's consider the statistics. In 2022, the UN reported nearly 60% of women and girls aged between 15 and 49 in Papua New Guinea have experienced some form of physical sexual violence, almost twice the global average. According to Save the Children Australia, 75% of children in Papua New Guinea have experienced violent discipline at home. Child Fund Australia 2022 reported in their lifetime, 2 in 3 girls and women in Papua New Guinea experienced some form of physical or sexual violence in a lifetime. In a more recent study by the Human Rights Watch World Report 2024, in Papua New Guinea, over 1.5 million people experience gender-based violence each year. Of this figure, 81% of perpetrators are husbands or partners. Shockingly, it has been recorded that one PNG woman is beaten every 30 seconds. To put this into perspective, by the end of my presentation, another 40 women will have been beaten by an intimate partner. These statistics reveal a deeply troubling culture of gender-based violence among the adult citizens of Papua New Guinea. But they also indicate alarmingly high rates of child abuse amongst the youngest and most vulnerable PNG citizens. What we do know is that there are profound impacts from child abuse on a child's general well-being and development. There is extensive research that has shown the direct effects of trauma has on a child's developing brain. Significant adverse childhood experiences have shown by Bath and Cedar to alter the physical size and integrity of various brain structures. This research has important implications for practice. Changing brain structure at a fundamental level significantly impacts a child's development at the starting stages of life and has lasting effects through to adulthood. These serious lifelong problems include depression, alcoholism, suicide, drug abuse, major medical problems, issues in maintaining employment, and the continuation of the cycle of abuse through perpetrating child abuse, domestic violence, or becoming a victim of DV. Perry 2006 found that children who experience abuse at home experience changes to their brain function where they become stuck in a survival mode, and the child cannot discriminate between safe and unsafe environments due to the unpredictable nature of traumatizing events. This can have a significant impact on a child's ability to learn in school if left without intervention. Key findings. In 2025, I was able to spend some time in conducting research in Central Province, in 3 Central Province villages, speaking with key community leaders and spending some time in the local primary schools from kindy to year 3. Additionally, I conducted research in Port Moresby, speaking with several organisations and services. It was through these discussions I was able to gain some valuable insight into what is actually occurring. What we do know is that PNG has extensive laws, policies and procedures in place to protect children. However, the rate of violence against children is still considerably high. So what is the issue? All Central Province villages I visited have had a similar hierarchy of community leaders. Leaders from primary school, churches, village council, and in some instances, an aid post and village court. They would all work together in some part towards the safety and well-being of the villagers. They would all uphold the community values and enforce community standards. However, what I found to be significant was their stance on violence against children. Each leader had a different belief as to how violence against children should be handled, with many cases failing to be reported to the appropriate authorities. A prevailing view was that it was a family matter, or that mediation with a cooked meal, compensation with some sort of monetary offering would solve the issues. Significantly, it was also the shared view around physical abuse. Many viewed physical abuse caused by parents or teachers as discipline. The issue seemed to stem from the lack of training on several levels. There was a lack of training to recognise the signs of abuse, how to report abuse, how to support a child through a disclosure, what teachers' rights were regarding reporting, and what should happen after a disclosure or after the prosecution of a perpetrator. Particularly when it came to reporting, there seemed to be a significant fear of retaliation from families if anyone were to report abuse. Many villages are small, with close interconnected families, so it wouldn't be hard to figure out who made a report. Although the Picayune Act provides a level of confidentiality under Section 41, many teachers still feared retaliation from reporting. Additionally, within the school system, there was a lack of training and awareness around the Act. The PNG Department of Education makes the following important statement in the Behaviour Management, a Guide for Schools document. It is important for teachers, head teachers, to understand the legal duty to report child abuse under the Picayune Act 2009. It is recommended that all schools have a copy of the Act, and staff are encouraged to read and understand the law. This was located on page 40 of the guide. The statement was published in 2009. 16 years later, the majority of teachers I interviewed were not aware of the Act or had any form of training. Furthermore, due to the lack of training, there also seemed to be a significant number of teachers that used corporal punishment to discipline the students. Ironically, many teachers acknowledged the corporal punishment was an inappropriate and unacceptable form of behaviour management at school. The corporal punishment included slapping children across the face or the back of the head, using a broom or a ruler to hit the children. Teachers were also heard threatening physical violence towards the children. This is significantly problematic. Not only is it an ineffective way to discipline a child, but there is evidence on the flow-on effect to the child's mental, emotional, and physical well-being. Research has shown when a child is in a state of anxiety or fear from a perceived threat, their brain reacts to the threat and prioritises safety, in turn, blocking their ability to think critically and learn. A child that is free from fear of judgment, rejection, or abuse will learn differently. They will feel secure to learn, make mistakes, continue trying. Additionally, there is the hypocrisy of being a mandatory reporter and inflicting physical violence on a child in your care under the guise of discipline. Lastly, it was evident that the villages that were further away from Port Moresby were either not aware of various organisations that were available to provide the much needed support and training they required, or were unable to access these services and organisations due to the location and the associated costs to get to Port Moresby. Additionally, the further away from Port Moresby or major city, the less likely they would to have police access within the villages in an emergency. Often the visits from the police would require a cost for the police for fuel. So this is why I would often see that the community leaders would take on that role for the police. So key organisations. Currently, PNG has a variety of intervention programs available across the country that respond to child abuse and family violence. These programs range from a major nationally operated program such as Family PNG, Eastern Highland Family Voice, Kokoda Track Foundation, Project Zero, Child Fund PNG, One Top Counselling Helpline, World Vision Picayune Defenders, the House of Hope, as well as government organisations such as the Family and Sexual Violence Units, the National Office of Child and Family Services, to smaller locally run programs by NGOs and churches. These programs provide a variety of services to families and children, including counselling, legal support, safe houses, child protection services, and community education. Each one of these organisations provide life-changing support to families in desperate need of protection and support. The issue is accessibility for families and communities that live in rural and remote parts of PNG. In addition to the accessibility is the knowledge of these organisations and what support can they provide the victim survivors. So looking ahead, in a rapidly changing and turbulent harmscape, we need to focus on prevention and intervention at a grassroots level. Currently, child safety officers feels like they're chasing their tail, providing intervention and protection. There needs to be a greater awareness around violence against children and what support is available. It has to start with the key figures within the villages and then move into the school system. It is through the prevention programs within the school that we can instill children with the tools they need to not only protect themselves, but report abuse when it occurs. Additionally, it is essential that the teachers are provided with appropriate training around safeguarding children, the Piccini Act, and their rights around reporting. So what is abundantly clear is that Papua New Guinea not only has a high rate of violence against children, but there is also an unsettling culture of acceptance of violence against children that also extends to violence against women. What is seen as a social cultural norm can have and is having a devastating effect on children in Papua New Guinea. So, to foster peaceful communities, protect our most vulnerable members of society, we must start at the grassroots level to bridge the gap between policy, scholarship and practice and build stronger links. Intervention programs and workers, although overworked and overwhelmed with overflowing clients, it is still in place. Additionally, the laws and policies are written. We must ensure that the people responsible for caring for and educating Papua New Guinea's youngest citizens are also trained and equipped with the right tools and knowledge to intervene when necessary. There is also a significant need for prevention programs with the focus on children's education, and supporting communities in the prevention systems. I will leave you with a final thought. A child who lives in fear cannot be free to explore the world without constraint, and thus is blocked in learning and development. Callum and French, 1987. If we are serious about protecting children, it is essential that we work on strengthening the systems that allow children and their communities to thrive. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Palu. We're going to move straight on to the final presentation from Francis. Which is this one. Okay. Just that one. Thanks. Oops.
Thank you, Chair, and good morning all. My presentation is basically on the perception of safety and management on urban centers in PNG, especially looking at Kokopo, Lae, and Port Moresby, as well as part of central provinces. This project was funded by the Pacific Research Program involving ANU, UPNG, and the Lutheran University I come from. The sites were basically in Morobay, or Lae, NCD, parts of Central and East New Britain. Conducted the studies in September to October 2024, and the report was presented in May 2026. Crime and safety remain primarily an urban concern, affecting residents' well-being, and it's a rising fear and insecurity amongst the community. Our aim basically was to assess the perception, crime and social problem, the safety, asking questions, who do they get help, intervention, policing, and court. Primary questions asked were centered around feeling of safety, during night, day, during big occasions, like Independence Day or sporting days, catching PMVs and transport, using social media, the perception of safety of different groups, social groups, children, teenagers, boys and girls, women, elderly men and women, and disabled as well. The responsibility for safety and who best to get the responsibility during conflict. We assess the police services as well and other justice or court systems. Whether crime are reported or not by the victims were also assessed, and also the knowledge of law and order or interim protection order in the communities. Basically, it's a quantitative survey involving 1,834 participants. We look at children, adults, and old. Questions, about 15 of them were used in crime and safety, and for policing, 5 questions. A Likert scale was used to assess analyze our data. In lay, basically, about 712 participants, Kokopo 1,028, NCD 986, Central 108, 14 members, 6 academics and 8 research assistants. It took us about 8 weeks. We got an ethical clearance from ANU as well. So who do we talk to? Sorry, there was 2,834 participants, basically adults. If you look at it, it's 50-50, male and female, or men and women, in 4 provinces. So what we found in these 4 provinces, in terms of feeling unsafe working in the night, 76% or 76.3%, most people in 4 provinces don't feel safe. Only 42% feel safe during the daytime. The victims of crime in the last 12 months, 27.9% felt they were the victims. About 1 in 4, that in, but 47 says theft, 36 assault, and 27% in break and enter. In terms of weapons in crimes, but 68% of the crimes were involved basically with knives, with 75%, guns with 25%. The social problem is the biggest, drugs and marijuana. Young men out of control, theft, 87%, and alcohol violence. So who is at most risk? About 76% say that teenage girls, and women 68%, and young children. Those ones feeling most safe, men especially 42%, elderly men 41%, and elderly women 49%. The big problem now is not reporting. People did not report or tell the police. Why not reporting? Basically, some of them say they deal with it themselves. And the other says they don't trust the police. About 17%. Some could not reach the police, and some might they say, might get worse if they report to police, they must retaliate on it. Who would you ask for help? Ask, and they said, police, the prefect, and community leaders. People use both police and community leaders for help. Looking at the provincial comparison, see, East New Britain province, it's in a crisis state now. The others, Morro Bay and NCD, as well as Central, on the moderate. Key indicators for East New Britain: crime victims in the last 12 months, 89.6% felt as unsafe at night, 21% say the gun was used, and 35.3% do not report it to police or having police access. The crime victimization rate, East New Britain shows 37% of higher victimization rate than the other 3 provinces. Safety perception across the province, the concern is the one in red. East New Britain feel unsafe at night and then feel safe during day, about 28.3%. Justice systems access by provinces, again, East New Britain have the lowest police accessibility, 48.4%, 58.4%, and the lowest reporting rate was about 35.3%. So again, East New Britain province needs urgent help. With 37.7% crime victims over the last 12 months compared to 21 to 26% in the other 3 provinces. 90% unsafe at night compared to 68.7% to other 3 provinces. 22% gun use compared to 0 to 17% the other 3 provinces. 88% drug problem compared to 67 to 72% in the other 3 provinces. So in conclusion, crime and safety concerns are increasingly at the alarming rate. Low police trust, low public trust in police remains a major barrier. Urgent need to is to strengthen the police professionalism and accountability, improve crime reporting system, enforce law, enhance law enforcement and sentencing effectiveness. Multi-sector response is required from government to church, communities, and even academic institutions as well. And job creation and poverty reduction is critical. Recommendation is to support community-based safety initiatives, establish and operationalize city-level law and order committees, support and expand the police post, village courts access urban and district areas, and ensure sustained funding, coordination of ongoing projects, and we may also promote church and government partnership for social intervention. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Francis, and thank you to all 3 members of our panel, to Yasmin, to Paolo, and to Francis. So we now have approximately 20 minutes or so before our break, and we have Sophie, who is going to be the roving mic for the session. So if you have any questions or comments, now is your time to step up. And if you have a question for a particular member of the panel, perhaps you could identify which member you wish to address that to. So do we have any? Okay. Teresa is going to ask a question.
Hey. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for your presentations. It's really interesting how the safety keeps recurring, and it's so in plain sight, but the realities of it, it's nice to unpack it in this panel. I just wanted to ask Francis a question about, I think with the second last figure with the police and like reporting to the police, so reporting to their own networks. With the report that Yasmin alluded to earlier, we did a pilot study and I interviewed some people in Moresby, and it seemed that, I'm not sure if you saw that in East New Britain as well, but with people taking matters into their own hand, everyone sort of had their own police officer on speed dial, if you know what I mean. Like it was an uncle or a one-talk or someone, like they could go to the police, but it was their own police person. And I wonder if you saw that in East New Britain as well, or can comment a bit on that. With the election work that I did years ago for my PhD, it was common knowledge that a lot of politicians traveled with their own police escort, but that's a different time, and it's a different type of having your own police person. So I'm just wondering, like, in the event where, if that is the case, they're going to the police, but is it going to the front desk or reporting to someone they don't know because they're a police officer, or is it, I'm calling my cousin, he works at the station type of police? Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, thank you for the questions. It looks like everyone knows each other in the community. You know, you have an uncle or auntie who is in the police, and when there's an incident, they quickly look at that person first before they go to the front, or the front desk front. So they quickly, with the telephone, they quickly call him or her, alert them that we are coming, or something like that. So that's basically the problem we found. So when the matter is reported, they don't go straight to the front. They go to the uncle and auntie's policeman, the policeman first, and then they will give their view before they come to the front. Because otherwise they will say that they already made a decision up there at the front. We don't go that far. So on that basis, they try to solve it in the case with East New Britain, I believe it's quite different from the other provinces, because they have their own sort of community systems that they try to, they use their own traditional way of solving. They don't go too quick to the police yet. They have to look at what system they have first, because if they're going, they're already breaking the law of that community. So again, it's based on whom you know in the system there.
Thank you. Before we go to Mercy, I just want to follow up a little bit on that. And I think, Teresa is raising the issue of relational policing, which is how policing actually works in PNG and in many other places. And I sort of often wonder about the sort of value of kind of surveys which are focused on individuals and individual answers, because I think it's quite difficult for that kind of methodology to actually capture the relational dimensions. And often the results come back that, everyone's sort of feeling terribly insecure. But really, if you actually sort of go into focus group discussions and sort of probe a little bit deeper, it's much more sort of complex and nuanced than that. And in a way, that's, I think, an issue for all our panel members to discuss in relation to, these sort of issues of individual perceptions as opposed to sort of relational kind of notions in relation to safety and security. But Mercy, you were going to... Mercy is over there? Sorry. Yep. Yeah. We have time.
Okay, thank you. Thank you so much for your presentations. My first question is to Dr. Francis, and I think in your last on your last slide recommendation, you mentioned established operationalized city-level law and order committees, and I was just wondering what your reflections are on something like the Gerehu Neighborhood Watch. I saw I think it must have been a DevPol blog, someone had written about how that has been successful, but also there are some challenges with that, with young men at Gerehu, living in Gerehu in that area, watching at the bus stops, just looking out for support. But I guess the issue they had was the recognition in terms of partnerships, working alongside the police in that local area. So just, I wanted to hear what your reflections are with that.
We also have the author of the blog sitting over there.
Well, there you go. Thank you, William. Yeah, so reflections on that. And then my other question is to Palu. Thank you for your presentation. I was wondering if you came across the work of Equal Playing Fields. They work with schools, mostly in Port Moresby at the moment, but because I do some work with them, and one thing I've realized from conversations with them is that, you know, they're raising awareness on child protection, child rights, and with teachers and students in primary school, at the primary school level. And they're noticing that there is a demand, like people are reporting, but, you know, obviously service providers are not doing much in that space in supporting. So I guess that understanding of referral systems, like did you come across that? What were some of the challenges or what people have talked about? They're currently sort of developing a curriculum, and it's looking at houseman, housemary, and how do we address, because, you know, the culture of respect and all of that, how do you address that through an education curriculum? So, yeah.
Thank you for the question. That recommendation basically was much more focused on East New Britain, where, or even in Central, but is it a police presence or not there? You know, as you go distance away from the main center, the presence of police become less. You know, so that recommendation was that, for example, in terms of East New Britain, they felt that at least away from 10 villages, there must be police posts. And there must be committee in. So because of the, you know, East New Britain being connected to road, or all 3 other districts, they felt that that must be established. Because then we got connected to the PMB, you know, passing through, and all labs was happening along the, you know, so they felt that about 3 or 7 or 10 villages away, there must be a post established. So community level policing must be at that spot. So that's where that recommendation came on board. So yeah, that's basically, I can talk about East New Britain and Labour. That's where basically my questions around that 2 centers.
Thank you. Palu?
Thank you. So with Equal Playing Field, I did have an interview set up with them. Unfortunately, we ran out of time and I couldn't nail down the time to speak with them. Regarding the referral process, yes, I have heard with the villages that are closer to Port Moresby who have gone through the referral process, they have acknowledged the frustration of how long it takes to get into this. It's overworked. There's so many clients already using the system. So there is those issues there where there is a delay. There may be a delay in receiving help. You know, they work as fast as they can with all the resources that they do have. Sorry, I forgot the other question you asked. Yeah, so it was really the people who did know about the organisations that they could access. There was a lot of frustration around the wait time. Then there was the issue with going to child safety. Again, it was a similar thing where there was a wait time for anything to happen. Obviously with the amount of work that they have to do. And then you also have the other issue of the further out you went from Port Moresby, they actually weren't aware of organisations that could help them. And so when talking to them about cases that they had come across or they were aware of, and if they had either gone to the police, child safety, or referred them to some sort of organisation to support them, they actually weren't aware of what they could do. And then you've also got the monetary cost behind it. For them to be able to access this service, you need a bus fare. You need a bus fare to get there, you need a bus fare to get back. So a lot of the frustration was around that the access wasn't in the villages. So if they had what they thought would be an idea was to actually have child safety officers working within the village or in the school system, each of the school systems, and coming out like once a week, which would help with the reporting process, but also help with them understanding how to get to the organisations that can support them. Because a lot of it was that they didn't know how to access or what services actually could provide the support they did need. Yeah.
Talofa, thank you very much for your informative presentations today. I'm also Teresa, another Teresa. Just a good follow-on from my sister's question over here to Palu. Moving away from the Western lens, I just wondered if you could shed some light on culturally grounded or Indigenous-based initiatives in PNG that help to build grassroots awareness and education that deter from physical violence against children. So really looking at going back to our traditional methods of healing. Can you shed some light on what's being done or what initiatives are available in PNG that are traditional or Indigenous?
From what I've seen from the Central Province, there wasn't much occurring within the schools. So I probably have a unique point of view in that my mum is from PNG, my dad is Australian, so I actually grew up with both lenses throughout my life, and so I guess that's where the struggle is when particularly through my thesis, is that a lot of the research and the scholarship, and even based around child development, it's based on a Western lens, and you need to try and come to an understanding that there's also a social cultural, like a cultural norm that we need to also put into it, a cultural understanding in how we raise our children to understand the PNG and the Pacific, the culture and how our views on raising children. It also needs to go into that, because that also affects how a child will develop. I guess for one instance, in PNG, and particularly in Central Province, we instill a lot more independence in children, which you don't often see within Australia, in particular in the Western view. We have a lot more independence in children in that we allow them to, I saw 3-year-olds roaming the village, 3, 4, 5-year-olds sitting and cooking over a fire, and you often wouldn't see that for safety reasons. Particularly in a school, there's a safety safety. There's a lot of workplace health and safety that goes behind how we do everything and protect the children in that system. So I guess that's the point that I make throughout my thesis, is that yes, this is what's happening, and these are all the literature. It is very Western based, but we need to try and change that and have consider the cultural aspect, because that plays a huge role.
I just very quickly want to bring Jasmine back into the conversation. And Jasmine, in the context that you're sort of working in and looking at, I was going to ask you, having done a little bit of work in places like G2 Estate, in the Narsori corridor, it's very evident that there are, sort of fairly strong forms of community governance. Can you say a little bit about how that works in the community that you've been talking about? And are there sort of committees that are seeking to address these sort of issues? And a little bit about bylaws. Are there any bylaws? Is there any attempt to create bylaws to address some of these? Because we've seen that in other communities in urban Fiji, a sort of efflorescence of activity that is being driven locally rather than by the state in order to try and address some of the social problems, most obviously around currently in Fiji, urban Fiji, Bluetoothing those sorts of issues. So maybe you could say a little bit about that.
Thank you. So, yes, there are village bylaws exist in Fiji, but it's not entirely applicable to this community, especially because it's not traditionally regarded as a village. It has a very informal way that it's set up. There is a person who acts as a Turangeni Koro. So they govern the indigenous communities around there, and also acts as a mediatory in terms of government officials that come into the community. But there's also some fragmentation within the community itself between the indigenous population as well as the Indo-Fijian population, and then amongst the Indo-Fijians and the indigenous communities as well. So while this newly established committee exists within the village, the way it operates is very new, and I think they're still exploring the waters around it. And in terms of how the Indo-Fijian people in this community govern themselves, it's pretty individualistic. So there is a lot of things that the indigenous people do together in terms of community building. However, that's not something that was observed within the Indo-Fijian communities that stay. And it's also because a lot of these people no longer have families there. They're the only ones that are left, because others who were relatives have sold off their houses and moved on. And also the fact that they have a very individualistic view of how they do things, and therefore they keep to themselves, and they feel like they are safer within their own household rather than community building with others, especially because then these are older populations who still believe in the notion of witchcraft, which I had highlighted. And then yes, the issue of Bluetoothing is present. However, the penetration of such in the community is not something that we actively looked into, but in and around Suvarnasori corridor, the universities, we do see syringes that are being used. In my community work, I also am aware of young people going and finding used syringe, pouring water into it to dilute the solution, and then injecting it back to get a high. So those sorts of things do exist within the communities, and I'm pretty sure it's the same. So there's another community that's very close to Vindongo, which is called the Walia community, and the seriousness of the crimes in that community is far broader as compared to Vindongo settlement, and there are people from this community that come to Vindongo settlement as well to perform crime and criminal activities, as well as drug peddling.
Okay, thank you, Yasmin. We've got a few more questions. 1, 2, 3.
Malo Apito, thank you very much for sharing today. I have 2 questions. The first one is for Dr. Francis. One of your recommendations, you noted to promote church-government partnerships for social intervention, which I think is great. I just wanted to try and get your insights about, yesterday one of the speakers shared that how do we ensure that information doesn't just stop at the elders? I mean, a lot of government, when they're seeking more grassroots level responses in terms of specific topics, they always go to the elders. However, some of that information is not then fed back to the community as well. So I think in terms of self-determination, that's very vital with communities who are, experience a lot of inequalities. I just wanted to get your ideas on how do we ensure that, especially for the voices, or include the voices of our young people, especially with the demographic profile for our young people in Australia. A lot of them are socialised within the Western society. So how do we ensure that, their elders have grown up in more, the stronger cultural identity. There's a lot of intergenerational conflict and tension that happens with the young people, especially in the research that we're part of, is how do we ensure that they are able to safely, with the relational practices that we hold, be able to share their voices and advocate for themselves within church and community. So that's for you, Dr. Francis. Secondly, for Palu as well, I'd like to get also your reflections about, when you're working within schools, I know that we always look at the legislation and the Act in terms of defining child abuse and how we respond to that in the most appropriate way? How do we ensure that teachers and the school themselves are educated when identifying the cultural aspects, but also separating it from behaviour? As we know, a lot of young people in our work also would misinterpret, family violence or family disharmony as a cultural aspect. But how do we ensure that the teachers and community themselves learn to separate those two? Malo.
Thank you. Let me start. As a church partnership with the government, after the survey, we have started a work in Lay City, and we have what we call Lay City Law and Order Committee. We've started, so the university that I represent, which is a literal university, which is a church university. So we have started work with that and bringing our youth together. They're working, so we also supported by our local MP, which is John Rosso. So that's it. We bring our youth together to take the lead, and the university that I'm in is taking the lead, and it becomes a center point. They come to the church. So 2 or 3 meetings that we had held there, and you see that we bring the lay city residents, most of them around, especially that because the land out there are the customary land, but they're given to whoever comes in there to live, and they take the ownership. If you look at the presentation that I did, Lay is becoming lesser, and then you see East New Britain province has taken the lead in crime. In the past, maybe over a decade, East New Britain was the province that we call in PNG as a moral province, being the most safest place that we live. But that is no longer now, and East New Britain has taken the lead now in crime, and Lay is getting lesser because of those programs that are in place now. So we have now making an intervention into it now. Thank you.
So I guess it becomes tricky because we have a high expectation on teachers. We expect them to be counsellors, first to be teachers, carers, counsellors. There's so much pressure put on teachers as to what they're expected to do, not just stand in the classroom and teach the children. They have to do so much more. However, there needs to be more training around science for them to be able to recognise the signs of abuse, for one. 2, but they're also, it comes from the relationships that they have with the families as well, so they can have a better understanding about what's happening within the families. Just because a child is not developing or showing signs of distress, it doesn't mean that it could be many reasons why they're not developing at the right level. It doesn't automatically mean that they're being abused at home. They could be developmentally delayed, and there could be other issues going on, like a disability. So they could have some form of disability that's causing the developmental delays. So that's why it comes back to the relationship that the teachers have with the child and the families as well within the community to understand what's going on and what's developmentally appropriate for that environment and for the children within that village. Legislation is obviously very important because it tells us what we can and can't do, and it's the guidelines. So that when we do see the abuse, we know how we can report it and we know what will happen to the perpetrators. But it really comes down to when we're teaching and educating the teachers that they have an understanding of what's developmentally appropriate for the children, how to see the signs of abuse and what to do with a disclosure. Because it's often what will happen, it will be a disclosure. A teacher might see, okay, they're not performing well in class, there's other reasons behind it, but it's often the disclosure or when they come in with physical signs of abuse. But again, it's very important because when I spoke in the presentation about physical abuse and it's seen as discipline, a lot of the issue is that there is a very fine line between what is disciplining a child, and what is physical abuse. And I think that's where that fine line often gets crossed. And child rearing is something that we learn. You're not born knowing how to raise a child. And so it's about instilling that knowledge within the community about what is appropriate discipline for children. Did I answer all your questions? Yeah.
Okay, we're technically over time, so we're going to run the last two questions together. So there's one over there and then one down at the front.
Thank you to the panellists. My name is Laura. I'm a fourth year Bachelor of Asia Pacific Affairs student here at the ANU. And my question was particularly to the first panellist, Yasmin, about, I found it really interesting how you brought up solar and how it was unreliable, particularly with the context of, local context of the weather and cyclones, and how that then put the community at risk, and also women at risk when things are stolen, particularly with solar panels and things like that. And I know we heard yesterday about, in the first panel over in the Coombs building, the Ambassador for Climate Change from the Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade was talking about how important it is that Australia is seen as a renewable leader and want to help the Pacific find renewables as part of their approach to adapting to climate change. And I just was wondering if there was any comments around that and how important it is to consider the safety and kind of the more local, broader context in terms of how solar might be perceived in an Australian context and how it's very different how you were bringing it up in the Fiji context. Thank you.
Can we then move on to, are you going to leave it, Amanda? Okay, fine. So, Yasmin.
Thank you. So yes, contextually very, very, very different as compared to Fiji and Australia. Yes, we have renewable energy movements, and our government is investing into it, but I also feel that while the intention may be good, it is also something that needs a bit more work in terms of consulting, in terms of research, in order to find out what solution works where. So for example, in Windongo community, electricity, hydropowered electricity would have been a better response from the state because one, it's very close to the shores, so heavily affected in terms of bad weather, quite windy, and also the fact that it almost always rains every day in Suva, so solar becomes a very unreliable source of energy within that community as opposed to having power from the power grid. But that does not mean we can't invest into renewable energy. The cost associated with renewable energy is also a burden that the communities themselves bear. Once, for my mom, for example, when her solar was stolen from the house, I went around finding out how I can replace it, so at least she has access to phone in cases of emergency. And I was told we need $32,000 just to start off. A service where at least they will have adequate lights and be able to charge their phone and have access to a solar-powered fan, because houses are built with corrugated iron and it's extremely hot, and especially much harder for women who go through menopause, right? So in order to have a bit of comfort in their life, they have to at least have $32,000 to invest. And that solution may last for up to 10 years only. After that, you need to replace it. These people earn as little as $7,000, $8,000 a year. They will never be able to afford that solar system. They got these solar small panels, about 50 centimeter by 50 centimeter that was provided by the government when they were newly elected, not this one, previous one. And they were never revisited. Nobody came and asked if it was working. And those solar panels had a life of 1 year. As somebody who's living in that community and with limited resources, health problems, only getting paracetamol when I go to the hospital, I'm not going to invest my money in solar. I'd rather put it to education and healthcare. So no, it's not a solution, and it will never be in terms of this community at least.
Okay, we're 10 minutes over time, so we're unfortunately going to have to draw this to a close. The conversations obviously will continue, hopefully outside. But I want you to join with me to thank Sophie for her introduction and our fabulous panel of Yasmin, Palu, and Francis. Thank you very much indeed.